Greetings and welcome to another reasoning in the reasoning series of the Rastafari Reasonings on Africa and Historical Perspective research project at the African Studies Department of the University of Vienna. We welcome you all to this Earthday tribute for Rastafari Elder Ras Baba T. And we have a few speakers today who will relate their memories and experiences with Ras Baba T and will give us an insight into the history of Ras Baba T. And we are very happy to have you all with us. Unfortunately, Ras Baba T's widow, Mama T, Mama Gloria, is not able to join us today due to technical reasons, but she's sending her greetings. She's very happy that ones are gathering for this tribute for Ras Baba T. And she wanted me to convey just a few points that, of course, Ras Baba T was originally from Jamaica, born in Jamaica, and was then, as part of the Windrush generation, moving to the UK, where he lived for 20 years, more than 20 years, working in the UK, where he met also Mama T, who are both from Jamaica. They married in the UK. And he was living there for about more than 20 years. And when he was 44 years old, he moved to Austria in 1980. And he opened the first Rastafari Reggae store in Austria, in Vienna, early September 1980. And together they stayed in Austria, Ras Baba T and Mama T, until 1989, when they repatriated to Tanzania, where he became, of course, a very famous radio personality, having every Sunday his Lovers Rock Reggae music show on East Africa radio. So Mama T is sending her greetings. But beyond that also, we know from Ras T's own interviews, there are interviews, and I encourage everyone to check them out on YouTube. One that Gota Irie did with Baba T, one that also East Africa Radio did with Baba T, one that was done in Uganda. And in it, Ras Baba T also related his history himself a bit. And what he always mentioned in the interviews was that it was actually Margaret Thatcher who was then questioning his status as a British citizen after living in England for more than 20 years and working there, contributing to the economy and having a British passport. But after more than 20 years, she said he was just a British subject. He had to pay some money to renew his passport, get new papers and whatever. And he related that in a few interviews that was actually the impetus kind of that made him to move away from England. And it was then that he came to Austria. Various people have related that he had contact with people, for example, even Peter Tosh, who played before that in Austria, that Austria is actually a place where reggae music and Rastafari, there is an interest for that. And then he came in 1980 with Mama T to Austria, opened the Rastaman Vibration record shop in early September 1980. And they stayed until 1989, until they repatriated to Tanzania, and Ras Baba T passed in Tanzania in 2021. He fulfilled his life dream of repatriation, of living there, and he became a very influential voice. And we will also hear some testimonies on that of ones who experienced the impact of Ras Baba T in East Africa and the influence he had. But first, I would like to introduce Brother Seska Sankare, who is the owner of Fasimba's African Vanguard Dub Root sound system based in Baltimore, Maryland, who was a witness to this very early time of Ras Baba T in Vienna. And please, Brother Seska, come forward and relate and share some of these memories that relate to your experience, your background, and the influence Ras Baba T had on the eye. Give thanks.
Thank you. First of all, greeting to each and every one. My name is Seska Sankare. I'm from West Africa, from Liberia in Mali. And when I was 15 at that time, 16, I live in Austria in Vienna. I came to Vienna with my parents in 1974. I was 10. And I attended the French school, the lycée. And growing up as a young teenager um, in a city and a country that didn't have a tiny number of Africans, it was with amazing when one day I left school and I was visiting one of my cousins who was his family living around the Bununus, and I I spot a flag, a red, gold, and green flag or something like this, and I was kind of surprised because I recognize such flag being the color of many African nations, the green, the yellow, and the red, or the red, yellow, and green. And I was 16 or 15, and I was very curious to see that flag, and in fact was at a store. So I step inside the store and I see what I see. To my big surprise, I see something that was not very common to see. See a man with snake in his hair, looking like snake, and with a big smile, and LP all around that place. Obviously, music was playing. It was a record store, and I can almost remember his very welcoming voice. Well, young man, come in. And me, to my amazement, to my surprise, and to my joy, the music at that time I was not quite familiar. I was, but not really. I wasn't. Let's put it this way: I wasn't. But we all knew about Stevie Wonder and Bob Marley. But yes, that was my introduction to Baba T, to his wonderful queen, Mama Gloria, and all these others ones who gravitate around that place. Now I was just 16, 15, so I was the very young one who was basically Jekna. Jekna is an Ethiopian word, and the term of mentor gradually by Baba Rasti. So these were my introduction to the music, reggae music, and whatever come with it. So at that age, at 15, 16, you are quite very curious and quite very happy to come across the music, the red, gold, and green, which I was very familiar, being I've lived in Ethiopia several times, and the entire concept of Rasta, whether it was through the music or through the reasoning with Baba T. So these were my experience. I went to the Bununus, which was a restaurant nightclub. The Rastaman Vibration, which was the reggae store at that time. They had some various function, night function, whether it was in Vienna or in Modling, if my memory was correct. And he mentioned Peter Tosh. I attended that show at Peter Tosh, I think it was in 79 to 1980, in a park, was outdoor. I remember very well because I was able to go behind the scene and get on the bus with Peter Tosh and all these musicians, but one of the promoters said I had to get down because I was part of the team. There was one tennis player who was from Jamaica. His name was Upton McPherson. He was a tennis player. He was a teacher, a tennis teacher at Modling. He was also Rasta. So you at that time was very, very nice. The vibes were good. They welcomed me. I remember being invited at Baba T house. Mama Gloria would cook the best of the best food. I was introduced on G.A. Rogers' book, Malcolm X autobiography, right up from Marcus Garvey. So it was all this information that was just being passed on at a very 15, 16 and onward age. So these are my fond memory. I remember going to Africa during the 80s, early 80s, and I came back and I had these two African garments, red, gold, and green, and I offered it to Baba T, and I offered another one to Upton McPherson. These were garments made in Mali. Being I'm from Mali, we visited Mali for maybe a month, and when I came back with these African garment, and I brought a gift to Baba T. And I was told many years later, in 2021, that when Baba T transitioned, he wore that same dress that I passed on. I gave it as a gift. So I never heard much from him. I just never heard from him since I left Austria, which was maybe around 85 or 86. And I only through Facebook, I was able to get the information and so forth about his passing, because it was all over social media in East Africa. So that's when I realized this Baba T was actually Emsley Smith, the Jegna, my Jegna, which is the proper term, the Amharic word for mentor. It was him who helped me, introduce me to the music, to the message, and to the liberation movement of Rastafari. And I'm very, very grateful to have met him, because through him, I was able to be introduced to a correct, accurate, proper version and understanding and introduction to Rastafari, and to the great music that came from Jamaica. I mean, always be thankful for the nation of Jamaica to have produced the music and to have been able to have such men, such as Marcus Garvey, who has helped the African nation and beyond. We cannot even imagine their impact that has had on the youth of my generation. So I'm grateful for Baba T, for his family, and for all those who, like him, have dedicated their life to the awakening and the awareness of the African diaspora and the African people, for better quality of life, a better understanding of their history, and a better involvement into the being able to fashion their destiny in the correct and proper direction. Thank you for listening.
Give thanks for sharing. And you told me before that you were basically coming directly in 1974 from Ethiopia. Your father was an ambassador during His Majesty government in Ethiopia, and in 1974 then you came to Austria. So you witnessed Ethiopia just before a sovereign African nation, and then coming to Vienna. How was that experience? And can you give us maybe a little idea of how it was to come to Vienna? How was Vienna at that time? And how did then the Rastaman come into that, so that we can even imagine it? How was that? It must have been like a very new experience for Austrians.
No, okay. I left Ethiopia in 72. I was very, very young. I was like 7 and 8. I do remember during that time, the seeing His Imperial Majesty several times in his his escort. Hear the siren, we will run to the veranda and see him waving. See how people would just bow. We see him a lot on TV, and we were 6, 7, young, and mesmerized by all what we saw. We remember seeing Ethiopia of that time through the eyes of a 6 and 7-year-old child, me and my brother. My grandfather was ambassador of Liberia during those times, and he witnessed the 1974 social unrest that was shaping up the nation of Ethiopia. Ethiopia had to define herself. What happened was a unfolding of a very complex history that many other African nations went through transformation due to the clash of interests and etc. So when the Dirk came, my grandfather was still an ambassador, but he was so hurt and destroyed by what was happening in front of his eyes that he asked to be recalled back to Monrovia. He was an old man at that time. He spent all his career in such areas of the making of these Africa of the 20th century, and he was a friend of His Imperial Majesty. So it was extremely painful for him. I came to Austria in 1974 at the age of 10. Austria, Vienna at that time was definitely not the same as it was, I guess, in the mid-80s and early 90s. Austria in 1974, at the age of 10, I attended the French school, was a very quiet, conservative, very unique city. You didn't have many African. You had a lot of Yugoslavia, yeah. You had a lot of people from Europe, Central Europe, but not many African people. So I can only imagine the experience that Baba T had when he came to Austria. It was not a bad experience. No, it was not. But it was very different compared to England or Paris or all these big Western, let's say, capital. Vienna was quiet. Vienna was very, very easygoing, and had some good memory of that time. But again, from the eyes of a 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and onward, up to 17-year-old. So I had some good memory, I would say. Yeah.
Give thanks. And apart from the good memories, how was it also then? You said there were not many Africans. Did you experience racism as well? And as a very young man, and
I
then
would say, looking back from my standpoint, where I stand now, and looking from the eyes from my memory, I would face a lot of stare, which cannot be classified as racism. I will experience a lot of, for example, I remember at the age of 11, 12, we would go to some of these bakery, me and my brother, after playing soccer in one of these parks, and all we had to do was just stand and looking at the cake, getting ready to buy, and you had all these aging ladies with their dog, and they would just buy us this cake and ask her to come around and say, "Where are you from?" And they'll touch her hair. Say, "Can we touch your hair?" Stuff like this. So that was the Austria of that time. Was they weren't as exposed to the presence of African, but I will not use the term with my understanding of what the accurate meaning of the term racism come forward. I will not use that term. No, I will not. It was just be some little situation, but as a youngsters, um, we will, we will just know how to deal with it, and we just move on. And we were in a good position, socially speaking. So I cannot say we were really affected by any form of such matter. Vienna was at the same time an international city, so we had like an international community and was fine. And Austria and people from Vienna were very nice. We had good friends. We was good. I would say that.
Thanks. But you say there was a few Africans, and how was it then to have this record shop, Rastaman Vibration, and this Rastaman Ras T? How was that then? Because you were living in Vienna before Ras T,
Absolutely.
and how was he adjusting, and how did it empower you on the other hand?
Okay. I would say to have a Baba T in Vienna for me personally was a bonus because here I was exposed to the music. I love the music. Always been into music. And finally, I was exposed to music that I could reflect on, music that I could relate on. And as you know, as young teenagers, you always want to belong and identify with anything that are more or less a reflection of how we are, who we look. So this is really my introduction to Rastafari and to Garvey, and I owe it to Baba T. He's the one who gave me these books like J. Rogers, Autobiography of Malcolm X, um, explain me the meaning of some music, of some songs, some lyrics, and just to have the presence of Mama Gloria and Baba T and that group of who were around Rastaman Vibration for a young teenager such as myself was good because I was well surrounded and they really look out for me. You know, I was the youngest one, so they made sure that they show me the right example. They make sure I stay in school, which I was, of course. But you know, all the good positive reinforcement. Yes, he was definitely someone who made sure that I kept doing the right thing, and I thank him. I'm always going to be grateful for all his positive influence that I received from him as a 15, 16, 17 young man growing up in Austria.
And on the other hand, maybe your influence on him, was he very much interested maybe in your experience from Ethiopia as a
Oh,
Rastaman?
absolutely. One thing I have to say is that Baba T always used to ask me question about the Africa that I remember, or when he heard that I was in Ethiopia, was always this fascination, and I was like that, the young African, but I was like, um, well, well. Mm, I mean, they were so welcoming. They were so nice with me. You know, I remember going to the record store. I would spend hours there, and just for me staying there, they would allow me to take LPs and to record them. You know, and that's how I got really introduced to the music, to the many exposure of being in that shop. That shop was like a cultural center because they're always reasoning, talking about world event. I mean, about Rastafari, about Africa, about UK, and at that time you had all the situation going on in England, the riots, and talking about Jashaka. I never heard Shaka before until I got these tape from Jashaka, and all I would hear was just like, and they were explaining me what was going on. So I was being exposed to something that even myself I was trying to be exposed to. So I was very, very fortunate to come across such positive influence, such as Baba T and Mama Gloria. Mama Gloria was like, whoa, always calm, always serene, so beautiful. So I mean, she was like respect. She was so positive, always just like majestic stuff. I mean, for me, it was something good. It was good because that's how I understand. That's how I was exposed to Rastafari through Baba T. So I always had a very clean, positive understanding and exposure. But before anything, I'll say this. Yes, I respect my Rastafarian brothers and sisters, and I'll give you four clear reasons. One, they say that God was black when no one would believe them. Two, they kept alive the life and deed of great African freedom fighters when it was not popular to do so. Three, they refused to allow their standard of beauty to be defined by European. And four, they never lost their vision of a united, dignified, respected African nation. And for all these reasons, while growing up, I was not aware at that time, but now being who I am, at the age where I am, from 16 to 59, I got to understand how I thank Baba T, and I thank all those who have helped me to understand and to be exposed in such perspective and to experience the concept of Rastafari in such way. Thank you.
Yes, give thanks. And you mentioned the Rastaman Vibration Shop. You said it was actually like a culture center. I can
Yes.
say. Now, having you said the Rastaman Vibration like a culture center where mainly African affairs were reasoned in Vienna, and on the other hand, you were from this African diplomatic background as well, where there were also African affairs reasoned. How was that experience for you? Was there a difference in how African affairs were reasoned, for example, in the Rastaman Vibration, and how it was reasoned in the diplomatic context? And how did you go between these worlds in a way, and kind of maybe brought some ideas from the one world to the other world and connect?
I would say this is that the Rastaman Vibration was really a multicultural experience. We had people from Africa, from the Caribbean, from Austria, from England. So it was like, and all of us, we interact, we knew each other, on a friendship level. So it was like a constant back and forth interaction between people who came from different backgrounds. So it was just, we got along and was just fine. Now, when you are a young teenager, um, you aspire more to be on the side of the Rastaman vibration than anywhere else. You are the the diplomat background was something that belongs, I would say, to the parents and so forth. I was just like a hot stepper, frontline stepper of the age of 16, 15. So I didn't pay much attention to that world much, and I didn't have no position in that world. So I related much more, to the Rastaman vibration vibes, so to speak. And it hasn't changed much through the many, many years. People like the Walter Rodney can attest to that. It's called Grounding with My Brothers and My Sisters. You know, these are the, I mean, you can relate. I'm sure Brother Ras Benyam can relate to what I'm saying, and I'm sure many of you as well. So yeah, it was multicultural center, good vibes, really good people, men like Charlie, Gabby. I wonder what happened to her. Good friends. They were just older than me, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I hope I'm not hijacking the discussion, but I believe I really had to share that experience from the early 90s as far as Baba T is concerned in Austria, because I was there at a young age. I hope I did enough of sharing my experience and of my memory of that time. It's been a long time, almost 40 years now or more.
Give thanks. Maybe a last question before we then go to some of
Yes.
those who experienced the Vienna time as well. You said Rusty introduced yourself to Rastafari, and that Rastaman Vibration was a culture center where people were introduced to Rastafari.
Yeah.
Now you said there were very few African people around at that time. So most people who got introduced at that time were local Vienna youths.
Yes.
Maybe you
Yes.
could share a bit on that also. How, when you say Rusty introduced ones and ones to Rastafari, how would Rusty go about? What is it that he would
Very
share?
good.
And how was it taken up
Very
by
good.
especially also Vienna youths living in that type of Vienna that you described before?
Yes. I would say through his deed, through his action, to the way how you will see him being so welcoming, so composed, so on top of his game and his ways. He was a force to reckon. And Mama Gloria again. These were like examples, really. You would see it. I mean, that were obvious. They had a business. Um, whether it was successful or not, I know it was open. They were very friendly, and people would come and buy their records. And the people who would come were not from a small village. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that whoever came to the Rastaman Vibration or to the Hands in Hands, these were some well exposed people. I mean, I well traveled. They had a huge collection of music. They traveled around Europe. Some even went, of course, to Jamaica already. So we were talking about people who were in tune with what was going on. And again, I repeat, very sympathetic, good people. I mean, that's my memory and that's my experience. Um, Positive vibration, and that was what this connection among those that I can remember the experience was about positive vibration, and these are my memory of Vienna of that time.
And being introduced to Rastafari at that time and having lived in Ethiopia before that, like probably nobody else who was introduced to Rastafari at that time in Vienna. So you knew about Haile Selassie quite firsthand. Were you surprised to hear how Rastafari saw His Imperial Majesty, or how did that relate to you specifically, as you had this specific background knowing about His
Well,
Majesty?
it's for me, it was kind of fascinating because here I was hearing some echo of things I've heard already about, but so far from Africa, so far from these places that are more or less maneuver my young self, innocent self, unaware self. So it was just an echo, was just a reminder for me that hey, this environment is talking about something that I've heard about. This is not daydreaming talk. This is not some blah blah blah. This is something that actually is concrete, is real. And then they would talk about history. They would talk about things I learned in school or I read about, I was exposed to, going through, history class and so forth. So these were very, very educational, very, very cultural type of interaction that we had. We weren't talking about blah, blah, blah. We were talking about some good stuff, substance, stuff like um, better than other things, irrelevant. So I'm always going to be thankful for that experience that I've for being exposed. Thanks to Baba T, Mama Gloria, Gabby, Charlie, Upton, Michael Besseler. Michael, I had a friend who lived in Modling, and he was an Austrian. And I think we must have run into each other for the first time at the Peter Tosh concert, but we befriended, and he invited me to Modling. So I went to his house, and here I get inside his room. I see nothing but LPs. I mean, LPs all around, all this import, reggae, Rasta music. And I'm just here, just shocked. And start dropping tunes like Prince Farai, Prince Allah, the stuff that even myself I didn't know. So what am I trying to tell you is that I was introduced to the music of the music by an Austrian brother who just like this. I mean, so is the reality of the experience that I cannot deny if I'm here trying to share you some of my memories about that time. Here was this brother named Michael Besseler. He had the entire reggae collection. Went to Jamaica, came back, and yeah, I was listening to all those music and befriending this good person. So my experience Austria during that time was one of multicultural interaction with once and once. If we had the same interest, then yeah, we could vibes together and so forth. That's how, as a 16, 17-year-old young man at that time I was. Yeah.
Yes, give thanks for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank you.
I think we will have then later afterwards time for questions if ones would like to ask questions, or if any pressing questions on any specific thing that was said right now, maybe ones could come forward directly. Otherwise, I would say let's have questions and interactive reasoning later. Give thanks again, Brother Seska, for sharing.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I
Very
hope I
great.
didn't take too much of
No,
your
no,
time,
no,
but
give
thank
thanks.
you.
I hope maybe later when once pose questions, we can get into some of the aspects even more again. So from those who experience these early days of Rasti in Vienna, I'm very glad we also have Professor Werner Zips with us today. I know you have shared on your experience with Rasti quite extensively also within our Rastafari Reasonings project at the University of Vienna, of which you are a cooperation partner, as well as, of course, also Professor Ennis Edmonds, who is also joining us today. And you have shared your experience with Rusty before, even in one of our panel talks. It was put on Austrian television even. But now having heard Brother Seska sharing his experience, and Brother Seska, you told me once at that time people would know you as Charles. So maybe Professor Werner Zips remember you with this name, but having heard now his testimony, your memories of that early time of Rastaman Vibration and then Hand in Hand Records and Rusty and Mama Gloria, what you have heard now from Brother Seska, how do you relate to that time in your life and your memories, and how did it impact you, as now Brother Seska told about how it impacted him and influenced him? How did it influence you at the time? it would be great if you could share some of your memories with us as well on this tribute for the Earthday of Ras T. Blessed.
Yeah. Yes, with pleasure, blessed love. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you to Brother Seska. You actually deeply touched me with what you were saying, because basically it brought me back like in a time machine, more than 40 years back. And basically I can just sign what you said. It's exactly the same experience I had.
Okay.
And
So I
I'm
didn't
sure,
dream about it, huh?
absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm sure there are a lot of other people in Vienna who can sign the same paper saying, yeah, that was how it was. So basically, there's not much I can really add. Maybe just an anecdote saying how I got to the shop of Emsley, how I got to know him, in fact. There was a small, tiny little piece of writing in an Austrian newspaper called Der Kurier, which is a mainstream, quite conservative newspaper that my parents were reading. And at the time, being a young student of law and interested in Africa and African music, I read this little piece of an article saying a new record shop opened in Vienna in Margaretenstraße called Rastaman Vibration, and he's selling African music. So at the time, you didn't have internet or anything. So to really get access to African music was actually quite difficult. I mean, in radio, you could wait decades until they play maybe one song by, I don't know, a very famous African artist.
You only play Boney M back in those days.
Yeah, probably. Something like that,
Abba.
So, exactly. So the first thing for me is I went there and I wanted to check out what kind of music he had, expecting traditional African music. Say music of the Maasai or drum music from Cameroon or something like that, or Zulu music, you name it. And then I had pretty much the same experience like you had. You get in front of that shop and you see two flags, one the Jamaican flag, one the Ethiopian flag. And you see the conquering lion of Judah, and you see all kinds of symbols and Bob Marley and Peter Tosh and so forth. So you were struck. You were basically standing in front of that shop and nothing less than an entire new universe opened. Probably for me, even much more than for you, because you had, at least from your childhood, the Ethiopian background and a vague idea of Mali and Tosh and so forth. I had that too, because most of my friends by the time, by 1980, were deep into Rasta music. So I had to listen to it in the car and so on. But not knowing much of the background, it didn't link to me. I was into Rolling Stones and rock music and interested in African music and soul and so forth. So going into that record shop and meeting Emsley pretty much the same way like you described it. I don't want to repeat it. It was this open arms kind of experience. This entire world of Rastafari and of Black consciousness opened up to me at this very moment, because you couldn't have small talk with Emsley. You would say maybe hi, and then you'll say who you are, why you come, and stuff like that. But then I guess it's now 43 years back or more than that, so it's very hard to remember. But I guess within a few minutes, we were in the middle of what is Rastafari? What did Bob Marley actually say? How does that relate to Haile Selassie? How does it relate to the Zimbabwe freedom struggle? How does it relate to the actual situation in Ethiopia with the Turk that you mentioned, which is sort of overlooked by many Rastafarians because they don't want to think about what that actually did to Haile Selassie. Or many people just, back themselves off from everything after 1974 and sort of freeze it in time. I remember we had a short discussion with Matthias at the book presentation a few weeks ago, where we mentioned the same topic. Very few people actually looked into what was happening in Ethiopia between 1974 and maybe the last couple of years after.
It was terrible. It was terrible.
Yes, exactly.
Terrible.
So these kind of discussions. And when I said, do you have African music? He said, well, everything here is African music, but none of it was the African music I expected to hear as African music. I believe he indeed had one record with traditional Maasai drumming and singing. One. The rest was reggae. But he would tell me this is African music, as much as you can get to African music. And I believe the very first record he played to me, I knew it from before, but it never made that click, you know. It was Peter Tosh, Equal Rights and Justice. And he did that, exactly, he did that because he asked me, what are you doing? And I said, I'm a student, I'm studying law. So why do you study law? And I told him I'm interested in justice. And he played that song, Equal Rights. We don't want no peace. We want equal rights and justice. And you know, that line alone, well, made me go into where I had to go to. And that to me was a big turning point in my own biography. I finished law studies. Not long time after, about a year after, in 1981, but I decided around that time when I went to Emsley's record shop to actually go into social and cultural anthropology. And then for some reason, at that department at the University of Vienna, there was a specific interest in the Caribbean. The then professor and chair at the department, he did studies with a colleague of mine, Manfred Kremser, and the professor was Karl Werner. They did studies on St. Lucia and a few other Caribbean islands. So it opened up a possibility for me to do field research in Jamaica on the topic of Rastafari, just like Dominic is doing now after his PhD and with the current project he's actually taking up the Rastafari Reasoning Project. I did then 43 years ago, and actually the person behind it was Ras Emsley, and of course Gloria, as you rightly said, because you couldn't get one without the other. Emsley and Gloria was just like Empress Menen and Haile Selassie, if you wish. It was like King Alpha and Queen Omega to an extent. And I 100% saying what you just said, that they were actually leading by example. The way they treated people and they lived with people, that was what you learned from them. That what you experienced. And so I can only repeat what you said. I want to give thanks for that experience hundreds of times. And I guess through Emsley, my life changed in a totally different direction. And then, of course, on a more physical level, soon after he went to Tanzania, repatriated on his own terms. Some Rastas may say that's not full repatriation, but according to him, it was repatriation. He didn't wait on no colonial power. He said, I'm going to do that myself. Legally speaking, it's not repatriation because the person who took you from somewhere, who deported you, should bring you back. That's legally speaking repatriation. But to Emsley said, I can't wait. I have this life. I'm repatriating myself, no matter what. And then you mentioned the date, 1989 or 1988, something like that. And he was coming forward and backward from Dar es Salaam at the time, particularly in summer, being the MC for the Reggae Sunsplash, not the Reggae Sunsplash, the Wiesen Sunsplash in Burgenland. So we met even after he repatriated to Dar es Salaam. And he said, so Wanda, when are you going to visit me? I'm there, come. And yeah, I decided to go there. And in 91, I went to Dar es Salaam. I had the same experience like you, Brother Seska, getting some wonderful dinner from Baba Gloria and spending time with Emsley. And yeah, being interested in nature and conservation and these kind of things, I asked Emsley if we could go together to those wonderful places in Tanzania. So actually we did a first trip to a national park close to Dar es Salaam. And that was the first time that Emsley and Gloria, she was on the trip, actually saw an African lion in the wild, which they haven't seen before. And then from there on, we decided, let's go to the Serengeti and to other national parks close to Arusha. And Emsley actually proposed to take his car that he exported from Vienna to Dar es Salaam, which was an old bus with 6 wheels, very strange thing, 4 wheels in the back, 2 in the front. And then we went from Dar es Salaam up to Arusha, from Arusha straight through the Serengeti, and we spent like 10, 12 days going through Maasai land. And yeah, it was just, the experience of a lifetime. I mean, going to a Maasai market somewhere on the border of Lake Manyara National Park, and then the Maasai saw Emsley in that car, which was painted in the colors of Jamaica, and it had the big writing of the company of Emsley, Car 10 Friendship something. Car was for Caribbean, 10 was for Tanzania. So it sort of brought together the Caribbean and the African experiences. And then there was Emsley sitting with his dreadlocks on the driver's seat. And it was one Maasai who saw him, and he went there, called the others. Then suddenly the entire bus was circled by maybe some 50 to 70 or even more young Maasai warriors with spear, fully dressed, all with the locks. These are braids, not dreadlocks, braids, and looking to the dreadlocks of Emsley. And then the same thing happened, what happened to you in the Austrian bakery. Every Maasai literally had one lock of Emsley touching this thing, what it really is, And he said, when I get into the car, free me, I don't know what to do. And they were asking, where are you from? And he would say, I'm African. Because remember, according to him, he repatriated. He didn't go as a tourist like me to Tanzania or to Dar es Salaam. He repatriated. So he repatriated to his homeland, which is Africa. So he would tell the Maasai, I'm African. And the Maasai, of course, would say, you're not African, you don't speak African. Because at the time, at least, he wouldn't speak Swahili, or maybe just a few words, Jambo and whatever, So it was a very interesting situation, because few Maasai spoke English, but he, of course, explained what it meant to be an African enslaved and taken away to the Caribbean, and now being able on his own terms and by his own work to get back into Africa. So yeah, I don't want to talk too long, but you can perhaps feel those were really life-changing experiences for which I give so many thanks. And to Mama Gloria, of course, as well, since she's still here physically in the presence. And we had quite a number of trips together in Tanzania, a year after I visited him again. And we went to Bagamoyo together. And we had some funny experiences, like Emsley would say, I don't need any tools, I don't need no spare tire. I just ask guidance from Jah. Well, it doesn't work like that all the while. So we spent an entire night in the bush, and the guidance from Jah was still there because it gave us a wonderful night where we actually could reason basically the whole night. We couldn't sleep in the bus on his experiences in Austria and his experiences in Tanzania, and well, everything, even questions of how he experienced Austria at the time. And he pretty much said the same like you, Brother Seska. He also felt that multicultural, actually positive vibes. And I would ask him the same question, by the way, and then I stop. Like Dominic asked you, I said, but Emsley, did you not experience racism? And he said, well, in the beginning, I felt I did. For instance, when I went into a tramway and I was seating myself beside an Austrian, a number of times that person would get up as soon as there was an empty chair and go to that other chair. So he said, well, at the time I felt racism. I felt that's a racist response. But then spending time in Austria, I suddenly witnessed Austrians are doing the same with Austrians. So then basically I realized they prefer to sit alone on a single chair.
Yeah.
And from that kind of cultural thing, to me, I always have that story in mind. It tells you a lot about quick interpretations that are sometimes too quick. Because speaking about that multicultural sort of universe that Emsley opened up with Gloria in that record shop, that's very unique that you meet on that eye level. In the, I should say, real world, because that wasn't the real world. That was a very, very, exactly. A microcosm.
Yeah.
Exactly. So in the real world, people behave strange at the time, and they still do, as we can see in the news. And then it's very difficult to say what is what. And so I really also appreciated what you said. I'm criticizing Austria for racism ever since, so get me right. I'm not happy as a patriotic Austrian that you say it's not non-racist. But I would say...
That's another topic.
Yeah, you sketched it quite nicely, and I think Emsley did it in a very similar way. And unfortunately, Gloria is not with us. It would be interesting to hear what she has to say on that too. Yeah, so let me finish saying the same like you did. Give thanks. I never stop to give thanks for that experience. And I just want to say to the audience, I may have to excuse myself earlier because Dominic just gave me the short notice today that you have this function, or at least I read it today. And I have guests, in fact. So if I switch off, please don't consider as any disrespect. Blessed Lord, give thanks.
Give thanks for taking the time and for joining us. Just a quick follow-up question. So basically then from when you met Ras T in the Rastaman Vibration shop in 1980, and then you visited him in Tanzania in the early 90s, it was like a kind of, then it started kind of maybe spiritually or mentally and led then to the actual physical experience of being with him in Africa. Can we then maybe imagine, Brother Seska said the Rastaman Vibration was like a culture center, and we talked about, that there was also, of course, diplomatic circles, African circles in Vienna. Was that maybe even some kind of African or Rastafari embassy space in Vienna where people could get in touch with African realities, Rastafari realities, that then even led you not just from Vienna, but physically to Africa?
Yeah, well, 100%. If you ask me, I mean, you can say many, many things. You could say it was like a church or something, but I would rather say it was really a community center, a communication center.
Yeah.
And perhaps you can say it was a Rasta Reggae university in its own way, you know, and it was open access, just like you go to a university in Austria. You don't have to be signed as a student.
Yeah.
It's open. You can go in and sit and listen to lectures, except seminars that are closed. But even then, most of the time you can ask permission to be present. And that was pretty much the same. So the question you asked before, Dominic, Emsley or Ras T was not a missionary. It was rather, if you are called to go there, you are welcome.
Advocate.
Exactly.
Advocate.
It needed your effort. If you wanted to know, you could ask Emsley any question, but he would not go around and say, come. And it was not in that kind of mission sense. But the thing that it did, because it actually was bigger than just a few people. There were a lot of cultural activities, a small African union, a lot of concerts that sort of developed around that thing, sound system, lectures, classes, and forms of exchange, you know. So it really opened up an Austrian scene, and I think we can be very grateful that I usually say, when I speak about Emsley, saying he was like a godfather, but I'm using that term how Cubans would relate to their santero, you know, to their priest on a spiritual, religious level. And in the sense of you are taken into the universe, the mental universe and the emotional universe and the historical universe of a certain experience. And that's what Emsley did. And of course, I believe most people who entered that reggae shop did not leave it the same. They left it enlightened to an extent. Perhaps I'm a bit too pathetic, but having seen so many people that actually followed Emsley, at any time when you would decide you go to the record shop, you would find people there, as Brother Seska mentioned. Emsley would hardly ever be there alone. So you go there, you enter communication, you enter reasoning, and you enter and you start to listen, and then you are taken in. You're not an outsider. There were no outsiders. Once you were interested, genuinely interested, and even if somebody would say, which is unlikely because they're going to a reggae record shop, but even if somebody would say, Rastafari and Haile Selassie doesn't make sense to me, I'm Christian or whatever, Emsley would start the reasoning. He would not say, this is not a place for you. It still remained open. You didn't have to be a Rastafari follower in the sense of believer, you know. So to get that person right, he was a very, very unique personality, a border crosser. It's not just people who were, you know, taken by Rasta or by reggae. It's people from all walks of life, I think, as Brother Seska said. And that what it was. But we were quite lucky to have a person like this, because, of course, in Rasta you have the warrior type, you have all kinds of things. With Emsley, you had a very open, very loving person.
Quality
At the same time, a warrior. He was a rebel.
Yeah.
In Nyabinghi to him, he was 12 tribe member, but Nyabinghi to him was something serious, was something sound. And he could talk hours and hours and hours about the experiences of a Nyabinghi. Even though he himself may have been closer to the 12 tribes. I don't even know if he was all his life with the 12 tribes, but he would give you an idea of the entire space of Rastafari, which is not that homogeneous and close as all of us know. There are so many walks within Rasta, in Rasta, that even somebody like myself, you address me as professor. I'm always a bit worried because to me, Ras T was the professor, you know? So, yeah. And even like myself, when nowadays people will say that's cultural appropriation. But if I'm not saying it, if I'm just thinking it for myself, it's Rasta I'm thinking. You know what I mean? So you have that kind of mindset in a lot of physical experiences. And mind you, one of the planes of Niki Lauda, and he, you know, the former Formula One racer.
The racer, Niki Lauda, yeah.
Yeah, and he would be a very, very unlikely person to be attached to Rasta. One of his planes was named Bob Marley. Now, one may say at the time he wanted to fly, and he actually flew to Montego Bay, so it was a promotional move. But it wasn't. In an interview, he said he only cried twice in his life. When Bob Marley passed away and when another Formula One racer, the Swedish guy, passed away. So that philosophy meant even something to a person like Niki Lauda, who was a hardcore businessman and owner of an airline. Yeah,
Yes.
so give thanks.
Give thanks. And not to take too much of your time, but maybe a last follow-up question. As you said, the Rastaman Vibration to you was even kind of a reggae and Rastafari university, what was happening there. Now, and you said Rusty was not like a missionary, but if you asked, he would answer. And maybe not going into too much, because as you said about the Nyabinghi, he could talk for hours. And when you were basically stranded with him in the bus in Tanzania, you were talking the whole night with him. So he probably was elaborating on this a lot, but maybe in a nutshell, or maybe even when you, for example, in the last panel discussion on this that we had at the university, Ras Chaka, Brother Charlie, was remembering to him when he first asked him, what is Rastafari? Do you remember also, because then at one point, probably very early, maybe meeting him the first time when you realized all this is about Rastafari, and you asked him, what is actually Rastafari? In an overview kind of way, what would Ras T say, or how he related it to you?
That's a very short answer. Love. No, really, to him, Rasta was love. He would not say Rasta is this and that and then define 10 points or anything. If you talk to him in the reasoning, you would somehow, you know, get a sense of all the different aspects of Rastafari. Be it historical, be it Black consciousness, be it anti-apartheid, because at the time, you know, 1980, that was the major concern. I mean, every youth with a clean mind was actually struck by what happened in South Africa. And I mean, you know, you were in Austria, so the anti-apartheid movement in Austria was Austrian, you know, obviously. And there were concrete people leading that anti-apartheid movement in Austria. People like Professor Walter Sauer is very much known to Dominic, and he was a guest many times at the department. He was a very influential person in the anti-apartheid movement. So yeah, these things, of course, would be touched in an interview, but or even in a reasoning. But at the core, He would say, Rasta is love. And when he said that, he meant it. And that, of course, was that concept of one love, not the physical, erotic love, as we all know. And that was actually, you know, what you felt in that record shop. Once you stepped over that doorstep, you know, it was like a vacation, basically, because people would respect each other, would show love to each other. Yeah, and even, you know, it didn't make a difference if somebody came from Zimbabwe or from Jamaica or from Sudan, you know. It was like more than friends. Friends connected by a shared mindset, I would say. Brethren, basically. And of course,
Not the brethren anyway.
excuse me?
Brethren.
Yeah.
Like brothers. Yeah, brothers.
Yeah, exactly. Brethren, even in the sense of, you know, not even gendered. So brethren and sister. And that kind of feeling was quite unique. And actually, when we talk so many times about integration and these kind of things, this little universe of Rastaman Vibration, that was a space where you could see integration in a positive sense, not in the form of you have to do something to become integrated, but rather in the sense of integrating, vice versa, you know, like milk to coffee, to speak with Malcolm X. He once said, coffee is the only thing I like integrated, in the sense of with milk, you know. In that sense, you would integrate. And it was quite interesting when we speak of race, because that place was a place for Black consciousness. Most of the things you will talk about were related to Black experiences. But at the same time, and I would have to be very careful today because it gets a bad name, but I think at the same time, it was a place of color blindness, because you would not identify a person by color first. You would actually identify a person by words and deeds, words and actions. And again, like Brother Seska did, I really want to give thanks for that, because it's something that you take with you. It stays with you if you are in Jamaica or any other place, and it's sort of a vibration that other people can feel. And that vibration first needs to get into you. And in that process, I need to give really respect to Mama T and Chati. More than just respect. I really need to say, yeah, give thanks.
Yes, give thanks for sharing with us these very interesting memories. Give thanks also for sharing your time. As you said, as much as time you have to spend with us more, we are very happy about it, of course. If there are any questions, maybe then right now, if you cannot be here much longer, maybe some short questions. Otherwise, we would then go on and give thanks for the testimonies so far. Yes, give thanks. So there was also another Austrian from that time with us, Sister Nora. She also remembers Ras T, also remembers Hand in Hand records. She's right now in Gambia, and her internet connection broke up, but that would have also been interesting to hear another testimony from Austria. I think those Austrian brethren and sisters who are still there like myself, we are too young to remember Ras T himself. So we would now move to East Africa, where, of course, Ras T repatriated in 1989. And as you said, he then visited a few times back to Austria. And I think Brother Charlie told me once in 1992, he visited the last time. And when I met him in Dar es Salaam in 2000, must have been 2013 or 12 around, he said now he did his work in the West and he was not planning, because he said they were still asking him for the recent Sunsplash Reggae Festival near Vienna in Austria, which was the biggest reggae festival in Austria. And they were still asking him to come. They said they pay his plane, they pay everything for him to host that reggae festival. But he said he did his work in the West and he was very happy to be in East Africa. And this is where he stayed and spent the rest of his life. And there he, of course, had a huge impact, not just on Tanzanian, but on East African youth in general, East African Rasta youth specifically. Wherever I was traveling in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, people would know of Baba T. And always I saw that the impact for Rasta youth by Baba T was very big, because then we get, of course, into reasonings when I told them, well, Baba T was actually living nearly 10 years in Austria and was teaching Austrian youth about Rastafari as well. And so we got into very interesting reasonings. And of course, one of those I had most of these reasonings with was my good brethren Ras Benaya. I'm very happy that I could join today as well from the Rastafari House in Nairobi, Haile Selassie Foundation in Nairobi, original member. And I'm very glad you can also join today to give us an impact, also your own personal experience of the impact and the influence Baba T had on East African youth, especially Rastafari youth. Give thanks.
Yes, give thanks, my brethren. I hope you pardon me. I don't know, am I audible enough?
Yes, blessed love. Perfect.
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, give thanks. So as Brother Dominic has said, my name is Ras Benaya, and I hail from Nairobi, and I hail from the Haile Selassie Foundation. This is the school of Rastafari, which I came to learn everything about the levity, and I met a lot of my brethren and my sisters. Basically, a small history about myself. I don't want to talk so much because Brother Seska has said enough. Also, Brother Zips, because mine was just from the aspect of being a great fan of Baba T. I can say I met Baba T, or I encountered him on the airwaves when I was still a teenager. I was 19-year-old, and I was actually introduced to Baba T by my older brother. And this was way back in the country of central Kenya, where I was actually born and grown up. So my brother, he was a good tech with a radio, because back then there was no internet, but we would get most of the information through FM radio. And my bigger brother, he was good at, radio tech and all that. So it happened that he was able to have this small set of radio that was strong enough to get airwaves from all the way from the city, because the airwaves of East Africa Radio, where Baba T was broadcasting, it was basically a frequency that was for the city, Nairobi city, just like there was for Kampala and the local city, Dar es Salaam. So my brother was able to tweak this particular set to be able to receive airwaves from all the way from the city. And he told me, come and listen. There's a man who is playing very good vibes. Come and have a listen to him. Because back then, yeah, we would get reggae. We had exposure to reggae, but the kind of reggae that Baba T was playing was just unique, unique in that it was not necessarily new music, but it was so deep. He had this deep roots reggae music, because I think he had a great deal of time to, come up with, deep collections of music. He had great links with artists from way back then. So I remember my brother telling me, you have to listen to this man, because I had this love for reggae, and it was just a special thing in me, because my other brothers, they were not really into that. And also considering I was coming from the upcountry, not many youth had this exposure to things that were actually beyond the borders of the country. So when I listened to Baba T, the very first time, I really liked his vibes, I really connected with him. And I remember I would really wait for Sundays to come to listen to Baba T's show. To me, Baba T's show was like a Sunday church service to me. I would wait for it from Monday, anticipating and, wanting to hear the voice of Baba T and the music that he would play. I think he used to have 2 shows back then, but this one Sunday show that endured for so many years until maybe around the time that he came to depart, from the flesh. So I became a very big fan of Baba T, and it was way back. Also, internet we had no connection to internet. Like I said, we mostly had to listen to FM radio. Even FM was a new thing that we would be able to access. So I remember still I had to try and connect with Baba T more. So Baba T would always give his postal address. And I remember writing him a snail mail from way far there. And I was so, gratified to hear him read my mail online, over the radio, and mention my name. I was very young and naive. And it really gratified me, like I said. But later I would move on to the city, and I would be able to connect with him more through emails. I would make sure I write Baba T an email every week, because he had, a chart where people would vote in some songs for the top 10. And I would never fail to vote for my favorite song. So what I would like to say about Baba T and my thought is that Baba T, he was a serious Rastaman. He was not only a serious Rastaman, but also for me, I had never encountered a Rastaman, face to face. And I was actually so satisfied that I could connect with Baba T even through the airwave, because yeah, we had reggae presenters within the country, but they were not necessarily Rastafari. And me, what I was really after was the message. I was thirsty for the message of Rastafari, and to know more what Rastafari was and who Rastafari was or is. And I got a good deal of the knowledge about Rastafari in my early days. from the music and also from the teachings that Baba T would speak over the airwaves. Yeah, I remember the teachings grew until a point where Baba T started interpreting or basically translating the speeches of His Majesty into Swahili. This was done, he started doing this in the later years of his life at East Africa Radio. And he would have, I think there were certain speeches there, some of these strong speeches where Haile Selassie, he talks about African unity and also spirituality. So the elder Baba T would select some of these speeches and have them translated into Swahili, which to me, it was a great thing because despite Haile Selassie being an African king, and despite him being from a country that is not even far from my own country, not many people knew about Haile Selassie or even his teachings. So for the elder Baba T to have been able to translate the speeches of His Imperial Majesty into Swahili was a great thing because it meant a lot of people who would not understand English language per se, they would be able to understand these speeches from Swahili. He also had a part of the show to also translate the speeches of Marcus Garvey. Again, the fundamental teachings about Africa and about repatriation. Because like the Bridgen has said, repatriation was really at the heart of Baba T's belief and his levity. So again, he would play music about repatriation, which was, to me, it was so interesting because the kind of reggae that we were used to, besides the the big names in the reggae industry who could have mentioned about repatriation, like Burning Spear, Baba T exposed the listeners in East Africa, especially us, the youth, to more artists who would talk about repatriation. I would say, in a nutshell, that the elder Baba T contributed to so much to the youth of our age, because we do not have a lot of sources of information about the teachings of His Imperial Majesty, or even the deep roots and culture, reggae music, that the elder had been able to gather into his collection. Yeah, so I give thanks to be part of this because I've considered Baba T as one of the people who helped me, to lay that foundation stone of within to be able to live the Rastafari levity. And I do remember something about his show that he would do every Sunday. Although the show was called Lovers Rock, which I think it was maybe like it was a strategic way of labeling that show Lovers Rock, also to be able to get more people, because people were mostly into Lovers Rock kind of music more than they were into deep roots music, which Baba T also wanted to bring out. So the show was called Lovers Rock, but significantly, he would start his show with very deep roots music about the culture, and even about the teachings of His Majesty. You know, he would play his selections very well in a very organized way. So for 30 minutes, he would really play music that was so deep. And actually, that is the part of the show that I really would never want to miss. Baba T also would promote African music, the artists from East Africa. He would have a whole 30 minutes playing reggae from local artists, which was also very good because he brought out voices that were not being heard from other, FM radio stations. So I remember that show. It would be after that that he would. Okay. Also, he had the top 10 chart, whereby he would introduce new songs. He was very strategic. He was a professor in music, in his own terms. So he would introduce some new tunes and play again and again in the chart every Sunday until people, would get to know this new music. So it would be after the top 10 that he would start playing the Lovers Rock. And he was so good in that because it was Lovers Rock that was also very inspiring, very well done music by the legendary artists, like Beres Hammond, very sweet music. So I used to love his show, and I used to introduce to, other youths the show, and tell them about it. And they would also really like the vibes of Baba T. So it was Rastaman Vibration in Austria, and then coming in as Baba T. Baba in East Africa, it means father. Literally, it means father. So he came with that spirit also of nurturing the youths, because this was the whole message also in the music, to big up the youths, to nurture the youths, to give teachings to the youths. And I can say I was fortunate enough to get exposed to Baba T, and to get these teachings that he put forward through his reasonings, and also through the selection of music that he would play for all those years. So give thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, give thanks for sharing this great testimony and memories. Maybe also just a quick follow-up question. So you said Ras T was actually through the airwaves the first Rastaman that you knew about. So when you then came to Nairobi, was it because of Ras T that you were looking for Rastafari then, and Rasta House in Nairobi and so on?
I would say that I was I was in this quest of wanting to learn more and more, because also from a reggae show, which would be aired just for a couple of hours, a couple of hours in a week, one session. I could not learn like everything about the levity. So I was still having that thirst of wanting to learn more. And it was the time that I came into the city that I met the brethren in the camp, which is the Haile Selassie Foundation. So Baba T only kept that, that fire burning, and, making me want to know more, because within the Haile Selassie Foundation, I would reason with brethren, or, one-on-one, practice the real levity, which was something also quite exceptional. Not many youths were exposed to, to such an experience. But of course, there were many youths who would listen to reggae music through radio, but not really be able to live a levity in a Rasta camp. Yes, sir.
Give thanks. And then when you met other young Rasta, not just in the Haile Selassie Foundation, but in general, were they also reasoning about Baba T? Were they also influenced by Baba T? Had you sometimes reasonings about his radio shows with other brethren? How was his presence among Rastafari youths, not just yourself, but in general, who did not know him personally or physically, but through the airwaves? How was that presence? Then, for example, in a camp setting, in a reasoning setting, were ones and ones reasoning about these shows and him?
Okay, well, it happened that still Baba T, he was not so like famous presenter. So not really many youths used to know him. But just like we would say in general, the trod within Rastafari levity is for the chosen few. So I met, a few brethren here and there who had a bit of, tastes of Baba T's music and show. But again, I did not meet people who are so much influenced by this. But I do remember there was one brethren from Kampala. I never met him physically, but he was a strong also fan. I just say he was a fan, but he was a brethren. He was like part of that movement of Baba T. I believe there must have been many other youths, in different pockets within Kenya or within Uganda and also Tanzania, who are also influenced by him deeply. But as much as I did not, interact with such, I used to know such a brethren in Kampala who was really, really inspired by Baba T. I think he was called Ras Mobero or Ras, Mobero or something, So he was a strong follower of Baba T. He would always, participate, and I would, be able to hear his contributions. So I think he had a group of youth in Kampala who would really get the inspiration from Baba T. Baba T would visit Kampala. I think he would have more shows in Kampala. He came and played music in Nairobi, but in Kampala, I am aware of that. So perhaps he had more exposure in Kampala than in Nairobi, considering also Nairobi had more FM radio stations, and this would take the attention of the youths. But in Uganda, I think there were fewer FM radio stations. So the East Africa FM was one of the big stations in Kampala.
Yes, give thanks for this testimony, and give thanks for this beautiful tribute, for everyone coming together and sharing their experience. I'm already looking forward to the recording and to also share it with Mama T and his family, Rasti's family. It's very special. I think now all those who knew Rasti, Baba T, Ras Emsley Smith, directly or indirectly have spoken today, even if some had to leave already. Yes, please, Brother Seska.
May I add something? I want to send out a special salute to Gota Ari. Gota Ari is a brother in Tanzania, who's been close to Baba T. He's a selector who has never met him, but through Facebook again, he has been instrumental in playing reggae music for a very long time. And of course, once Baba T came to, maybe Wagner met him when Baba T came to Tanzania, young Gotahari at that time, just like you certainly were influenced, and being he was in Tanzania, met him many times, etc., etc. So I want to send a special salute to Gotahari, who is in Tanzania, who's been promoting, pushing the positive liberation reggae music and the clean, good, positive lovers rock reggae from UK and of course from Jamaica.
Yes, give thanks. Brother Gota Irie also was planning to join today, but unfortunately also had some technical issues. And of course, he did a very extensive interview with Ras Baba T that is also on YouTube in 2 parts, where also Ras T is sharing his thoughts on many issues. That is an important interview that Gota Irie did with Baba T. Yes, give thanks. Are there any questions? We can open now the floor for questions from the audience as well. If there are still any questions to any of the presenters today or about Rasti in general, give thanks, come forward now. Yes, give thanks. I think it was quite clear, all the presentations, the memories shared, and the testimonies shared. Give thanks for everyone joining today. Give thanks for this tribute and for all who still stayed for the whole tribute. I know it was quite short notice. As I said, originally we tried to do already this year the tribute in person in the original Rastaman Vibration shop, which did unfortunately not work out. Also, Brother Charlie Ras Chaka is sending his greetings, who also could not join right now today. So, but it was then quite on a short notice that we did this online on Zoom. It worked out great because the great advantage of the Zoom was that we had all your testimonies from around the world and not just here locally, but maybe in the future we can do a hybrid locally here in the original location as well as on Zoom in the future. Give thanks. Yes, Brother Seska?
I also want to give a special salute to Leon Bowen, who is Baba T grandson. He was instrumental in giving me some information and always keeping me informed about how Mama Gloria is doing. He's in England, and he also wanted to take part, but due to his work schedule, could not make it. So salute to Leon, to the family, and I hope we did well in paying tribute to his grandfather, great-grandfather.
Yes, give thanks. Yes, of course, the family, Mama T and Brother Leon were instrumental also for bringing this tribute together, even though they could not join themselves, but I'm sure they will be happy and looking forward to seeing then the record that we will put online. Give thanks for all for joining today for this tribute for the great Ras Baba T, Ras Emsley Smith, from 1936 in Jamaica, through UK, through Austria, to 2021 in Tanzania and beyond, having greatly influenced ones and ones throughout the continent, throughout the world. And we all have gathered today here to give thanks for that. Give thanks for the memory, the works, and the mission of the great Ras Baba T. Give thanks and see you next time in our Rastafari Reasonings series, in the Rastafari Reasonings on Africa project at the Department of African Studies at the University of Vienna, Austria. Give thanks for everyone joining. Blessed love until we see you again. Give thanks.
Blessed love. Give
Thank
thanks.
you very much. Well done.
Give thanks.